Boys, another potty. This will be the last one we have while Scotty's in the UK, because next week you're going to be traveling, so we're not going to do one together. Just be MG and I holding the fort. So the last potty that you're going to be recording in the UK. How do you feel, Scotty?
I feel good. It'll be different. It's funny, we were just saying off air how you guys are cold over there. It's freezing, but over here, I mean, I'm in a t-shirt. It's 19 degrees and sunny in the UK at the moment. They're like, we're having a heat wave at the moment, and I'm like, come on, seriously. But no, it's good. Looking forward to getting back. Definitely ready. And yeah, it'll be good, and it'll be good to see you boys. I've seen MT obviously in Bali, but MG, I haven't seen you in forever. So it's been a long time. Looking forward to catching up with everyone, getting back into the swing of it. I can't wait to get back to Powerhouse in my own gym and train. Definitely looking forward to that. Turns out I don't love sharing gyms with other people, having to wait for equipment and being patient. So no, I'm looking forward to it, man. It's going to be good.
So what do you need to wrap up there before you leave? Anything from a work study perspective or anything like that?
So work-wise, everything is done and dusted now. So my contract with Saracens is up. We had our sports science sort of send-off. They had a send-off for me. Went out for a really nice they call it a boozy brunch, but obviously I don't drink. But we had some good Italian food, which was good. It's kind of bittersweet. Really good group of people that I'm fortunate enough to work with, and it's obviously disappointing to leave. And obviously they were a bit disappointed because I think they were kind of hoping that I was gonna stay and go around again. But I'm looking forward to getting back to Oz. But that's all done now. So we got knocked out in the semi-final. I thought we would have been in the final this weekend, hence why we booked our tickets to be a bit later. So it's been a little bit cruisy this week, not having to commute up and back to London. So I've had a lot more time. I've kind of had the afternoons off every day because I get up early, I do my check-in block, respond to my emails, bits and pieces with NBA. And then, yeah, so it's kind of a nice balance, but equally I'm looking forward to getting back to Melbourne. Everyone's kind of saying, oh, it's so cold here, brace for it. And I had a look, and I know you guys have had some lows of like 2 and 3, I think. But the days I think is still nice, like 13, 14.
Yeah, if you call that nice, but yeah.
Well, I would say that nice only because, we would have said over here it's starting to get warmer when we were getting those 13 and 14 degree days as of sort of April-ish. It was getting nicer then. So I think, I'm definitely equipped to the cold now. So I won't need any tracksuit pants or crazy scarves or anything of that nature, because it's one of those things, until you've truly experienced like going for a walk and your fingernails feels like someone's putting a knife in them because it's so cold, like -3. It's a different beast. But none of that even remotely concerns me. I just can't wait to get back and see everyone, catch up with you boys. I was messaging you guys yesterday saying that first week I'm back, we need to tee up a coffee. So we might have to do a potty and then a coffee catch up in person afterwards. It'll be good.
For sure. And so obviously you come back, and so pretty much your first work week will be the first week of July, right? The 1st of July, basically that'll be your first work week back in Melbourne. And then that weekend you're going to Adelaide, right? For the NBA workshop.
Yeah, so that's a big week because my research study will also start on the 1st of July, which is I think it's the Monday, that first Monday basically that I'm back. It's the 1st of July. So that will start. So it'll be a busy week with that. And then MG and I were also talking off air saying that we're going to Adelaide, on the Saturday, I think, isn't it? Yeah, so we've got the workshop there, which will be awesome because I'm looking forward to catching up. I've got some of my athletes in SA and some of your athletes in SA, so it'll be good to see them because I haven't seen anyone since, October last year. And just to meet all of the potential NBA athletes that will be doing Season B, it's going to be good. I can't wait to just immerse myself back into the natural bodybuilding culture.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. It's all starting back up. Like workshops are starting. I've got one this weekend on Sunday with Donna, and then on that weekend that you guys are away in Adelaide on the Saturday, on the Sunday I got a workshop with Nat Kipney. So it's all happening now. But how's everything going with you, MG? Give us a bit of an update.
Man, today was my first official day back at work after last week's round of the podcast was before I had my injections last week. So I had my injections in my sciatica, which was like a massive shock, man. But such a big help. I feel like I got the benefit from it around day 4. Day 5, I really started to feel like I could walk a lot better. There's still a dull ache all day long, but it's a massive improvement from where I was. So finally got to go back to work today. I've got to say the 3 degrees this morning when I got there at 5:30 after a month off was an absolute shock to the system. beanie back on, puffer jacket, and I think tomorrow morning I got a 6 a.m.er, and I think it's going to be like 1 degree. So a nice first. I think the coldest 2 days of winter is the 2 days I started back. But you know what? I would take it every day of the week because it's been a rough month. You know, from a perspective of not being able to move, and you know, probably the toughest month from a mental health perspective for me because you know, not being able to train, which a month off is the longest I've ever had in my life since I've started training. You know, even through my surgeries, my knee reconstructions, I've never had anywhere near a month off. So it's nice to be back and functioning and feeling like a human again, man. So it's I'm in a good place today.
So the cortisone injection worked. It worked well, and it only took a couple of days to kick in.
Yeah, well, I'm definitely on the improve. I've seen massive improvements. Thursday will be 7 full days. So what does that make today? Today makes, say, day 5, day 6, which is typically when most people feel the benefit from it. From, say, day 5 to day 10, everyone's different, of course. For me, the biggest difference is being able to walk without feeling that compression. I can definitely feel the compression if I can't bend over. So I can't bend over properly. I've got to do a single leg sort of hip hinge if I want to bend over. I can't pick anything up. I can't really take any load. But, I mean, I couldn't walk just 6 or 7 days ago. So for me, it's quite a big jump. And I would say, you know, we're almost out of that acute phase now, which is good, which means that we can now look at stage 2 of rehabilitation, which is going to involve introduction of new exercises rather than just exercises to stop me from kind of compensating everything that I'm doing, and which is creating even more problems. So it's a big positive step, man. Definitely.
That's really, really good news, man. I know how you were feeling and how it was getting you down a little bit. So it's good to see that at least things are looking up and looking positive for you. So that's absolutely awesome.
Yeah, man. I'm very, very happy, very, very grateful that, you know, I did take the advice of the people around me, and feeling the way I'm feeling today, I'd sort of be kicking myself if I had gone ahead and done that surgery. Not to say surgery is wrong or that I won't end up having that surgery anyway, but I feel positive about where I'm at the moment. And I feel like I might be able to, you know, even if I can get another couple of years, man, and not have any issues, it's still in my eyes now worth it. So I just feel in a much better place now, man.
That's awesome. And how's everything at home? How's everything going there? Obviously you got to move, right? You got to start packing, right?
Yeah, so we actually settle on Friday, so just a couple of days away, which is awesome. But I'm just waiting for Scotty to get back. There's no point moving until Scott's here. I don't want to live in the suburb until he's back. So we'll put the move off until Scotty gets back, which is nice. I just want to also say, man, I just want to thank everyone. I've had, you know, how many listeners have reached out and offered to help me move. People are so kind, so generous. If you're one of those people who messaged me, thank you so much. I had so many people message. It was the sweetest thing. I really do appreciate it. We've just kind of been packing slowly. Meve's been kind of filling the role of everything over the last few weeks, including, you know, packing everything. We're just going to do it nice and slow. We've got a few weeks between settlement and having to be out of where we are at the moment. So we're a bit fortunate in that regard. And I'm going to be quite limited in what I can do, but definitely just got a moving company doing the bulk of the work. But yeah, everything's great, man. Talia's been amazing. Can you believe Talia will be 4 months on Sunday?
Wow. That's
crazy.
So fast. Holy.
Man, crazy. And I actually thought I messaged you last week because I got a bit of a, you know, a nice story, and I thought we might, you know, introduce a bit of a quick new segment each week, which was where, you know, I really wanted to give like a bit of a shout out to someone who was doing something really, really amazing. And we took Talia to her first split splash swimming lesson. Me jumped in the pool, obviously couldn't be in there, at Watermark in Greensboro. If anyone knows it, really, really great facility, great swimming centre. And there was a care worker there who was working with disabled children in back-to-back sessions. So say I was there for about 2 hours all up. There was a young guy working there with kids with a mix. There was some cerebral palsy. There was Down syndrome. And, you know, I'm quite close to a few people with Down syndrome. This guy was so passionate about his job, and watching him make, you know, that 45 minutes for these kids in the pool so much better was just the most heartwarming thing. So I just had this moment where I was like, you know, if you're a care worker and if you're a care worker and you're out there, you're one of our listeners, you take your job seriously and you are really, really passionate about what you do, you are making a difference. And shout out this week goes to all the care workers out there, man.
Yeah, it's a really honorable role, isn't it? And they make a massive difference. And yeah, we're really, really lucky to have some beautiful people in the world like that. So yeah, it was really good that you brought that up. That's a really, really good story. I love that. When you did tell me, I was like, yep, you definitely got to bring this one up for sure.
And I just feel like, you know, every week there's going to easily be a really good example of something that was pretty special from the week before. And I'm like, let's just bring it to light each week and start off with something nice like that. Yeah,
definitely. Well, we know in a couple of weeks' time, something really special is going to be a big hug from Scotty.
Yeah, we're going to take that.
It's going to be the highlight of that week for sure. I'm kind of spewing. You
wait.
guys get to spend some time together on a plane and go to Adelaide. I've got a bit of FOMO.
You can join.
Yeah, I could
I
actually.
know we're gonna have to change the seats. I think we're both on an aisle, but we might just we'll just get snug right in together and hopefully just get another big human so that we can just be really condensed.
Yeah, be like old times.
Yeah, can't wait.
All right, let's get stuck into some questions. So the first one is about the bikini change that we made in NBA. So we released that change last week, where now for bikini, we are going to be doing half turns with the front pose being angled, so not hip square to the judges, and with the back pose being hands down and hair down. So one of the questions was, why did the posing change? Is it to be aligned with IFBB? So the reason why we did it is to bring bikini to the international standard and what the posing is more commonly internationally. And obviously IFBB is one of the biggest international federations. So yes, it does align with it for that reason. You know, we had a look at all the things and all the categories that we have, and every single category bar a couple, also international categories. So you've obviously got bodybuilding, classic physique, men's physique, figure, bikini, and even wellness too. And all of those we pose exactly the same as how they pose internationally. There's only bikini was the only one that wasn't. So we decided to align that to the international standard. The only ones that are left are really men's fitness, which is not something that's done commonly internationally, female fitness, and female sports. So they're more common in Australia, maybe some other countries, but they're not really a big international category. So we're leaving them as is for now, unless things change. But bikini was the one that is a very, very common, popular international category. And we decided to bring that up to the international standard so we can align more closely with that. So that was the biggest reason that we did it. The other question that was asked, which is actually a really, really good question, is if I have shorter hair, is it advantageous now because I get to display my back where other people don't? And actually, when this question came in, I had a bit of a think about it, and I had an opportunity to speak to Stu, because this is a judging question. This isn't I can have an opinion on it, but I wanted to get the judge's response. And basically what he said is, you still need to present an X frame. So if your hair is covering your back, you still have to have wide back, wide shoulders, right? So it's still going to be judged. Your X frame is still going to be judged. But obviously the musculature in the middle of your back will be covered if you have long hair. One really, really good point that he did mention is a really, really common thing is that women get really, really lean in their back before they get lean enough in their lower body to be competitive. So having the hair cover your back will hide the fact that maybe you're too lean in your upper body and in your back. So he brought a really, really good point, which I didn't think of until he mentioned it. And I thought, well, it is pretty common that a lot of girls have to get really, really lean to display their lower body, but the upper body is what people say is too lean for bikini. But well, now it's not going to be an issue because you get to cover your back, and also with the hands down, those back muscles wouldn't be as displayed as much or even flexed per se. So that's a really good, really, really good question. And I was really glad that I got into Stewie and asking that question because I wanted to get it from a judge's perspective. What do you boys think about the change, MG? Have you had a really, really good response from it?
Yeah, look, personally, man, from a coaching perspective, I really, really like the change. And I've had lots of people message me and ask me what my thoughts are. And, you know, my answer's been the same. For me, you know, who is a big fan of the bikini division and always has been, I like the decision more because it just creates even more clear separation between each of the divisions. So for me, as a coach, I can clearly now articulate to my client the difference between bikini and sports in NBA purely because this change makes it even easier. So all of a sudden, if you're a more muscular athlete, you probably do want to show your back. So now it's like, okay, well, you've got a lot of back muscle and you're not going to show it off in bikini. So maybe it's a conversation where, are you a sports model? So for me, it just gives me a little bit more clear pathway for where my female athletes are going to compete. If I think they're a crossover between bikini and sports, I think this is going to take that out of the equation. I'm going to know exactly where they stand now, because as soon as your hands are down, your hair's down, you're either going to have that X frame or not. You're either going to be hiding a lot of back muscle or not. So it's for me, I think it's a great decision. And I love half turns. I've always been a massive fan of half turns. And I'm just so glad that that this decision was made. I think a lot of people are going to enjoy seeing this change on stage, man.
Yeah, I agree. I cannot wait for that first show to see that change and to see that first bikini category. We've got really, really good feedback from everyone. Obviously, we spoke most of the posing coaches too, and they absolutely loved it. And if anything, it simplifies it and makes it easier to pose because it's only a half turn. Yeah. And you don't have to worry about how you position your lats or flare your lats when your hands are up, which is always very, very difficult for some females.
Yeah, I think the other thing that is really great for the sport, credit to you guys for this, is if you look at this nationally now, if you're going to be a bikini competitor and step on an NBA stage, you don't have to stress at nationals which state you competed in previously and what you then need to present at nationals, because it's not going to be different in New South Wales as it will be to WA, as it will be to Vic. Like happens sometimes with other federations, where an athlete does really well in their state, goes to nationals and presents a different front pose, but that's what's good in their state and doesn't do well at nationals. That's gone now because it's standardized. It's one look that's like. So all of a sudden, and for me personally, I don't like the front on pose. I don't think it's very much suited to bikini. I think it, suits sports and fitness obviously a lot better, but it's worked in some states and different federations before. Even I've had athletes that have done really well in Victoria, gone up to nationals, also done well, but not done as good as they could have, and we've had to change their pose last minute to suit a different judging panel halfway through from first division to second division. That's all gone now. It's standardized. As a coach, it puts us in a really, really great position for any bikini athletes that we have nationwide. We know exactly what we're going to get. We know exactly how we need to stand. I think it's a big plus.
I think that standardization across every single state is a really, really big positive. And you know what you're going to get at every single show in every single state, and you know what you're going to get in nationals. So it's going to be pretty clear, which is good. Scotty, any feedback on that? Any feedback on standardizing posing in general and making those kind of changes?
Yeah, bikinis. Most people, the reason I'm not really chiming in because I don't work with bikini athletes. So, but it doesn't mean I don't have an opinion on it. And I think you guys both know where I stand on that. I think standardizing it in a sport where there's already so much nuance in terms of, do you like this, do you like that? I think there needs to be an element of standardization, because otherwise, it's such a subjective sport, and this is a way to help, I guess, quantify to an extent, because it's like everyone stands the same way and you're critiqued in this specific pose. And I think as a judge, like if I was judging, it would make life so much easier in terms of being able to gauge, because you're comparing apples with apples because everyone's in the exact same shot. So I think it's a really good start, and I'm adamant that all of the other federations will probably follow suit, or at least I think they'll find that when they see the positivity surrounding it. Because I know I'm over here in the UK, but I haven't heard anyone speak negative about it. I think it's been received, even looking at the post, really, really positively. And I think it's one of those things, as long as everyone gets on board, then it's only going to be good for the sport. So I like it. And to be honest, I like it for all of the divisions with the exception of maybe Classic. Mm-hmm. And that's purely just because I think Classic, it has that variance, and it's almost like it's its own, it's its own sport. It's very old school. You can have that flexibility and that freedom, but for everything else, I think standardizing it is the way and is the future going forward.
Awesome. That's really, really good feedback. All right, let's move on to the next one. So if a previous pro now openly takes performance-enhancing drugs and competes in untested federations, do they keep their NBA pro status or pro status in any natty fed, let's just call it that? You need to think of it as they've earned that pro card. You can never take it away from them. That's theirs. They've earned it. And I wouldn't see it as a status like you turn on and off. That's their pro card. They earned it. They have it. It's not going anywhere. It's just that if they are now enhanced, they can't utilize it. They can't go into a natural show and compete as a pro anymore. But it doesn't mean that they get their pro card taken away from them or they get disowned or anything like that. It just means that they've moved on to a different aspect of the sport and they're no longer a natural athlete, so they can't compete as a pro in whichever federation they hold a pro card in. Mm-hmm. Anything on that, boys? Pretty self-explanatory.
No, I think you win a pro card, you sign a contract basically that says open yourself up to testing at any stage, and so you have to be an active competitor. So ultimately, if you've crossed over to the other side, you're just forfeiting your ability to ever compete as a natural pro, but it doesn't mean that you didn't earn your pro card still. All
right, next one. This one's about diuretics, and it actually says an athlete's name. So I heard this athlete, and it says their name, used diuretics during peak week. Thoughts on the use? Are these banned in natural federations? So I'm not going to say the name because I'm not going to call anyone out. But
was this asked as a private question, or they actually legit? Just did it as
anonymous. Yeah. Wow.
We're keen to know who this person is, just so I can have a look at the physique to see what it looked like.
I'll let you know later.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
But a couple of things on this. So firstly, diuretic, is it a natural diuretic or is it like a dandelion tea or something like that? Or is it, a herbal based one, or is it like a synthetic one that's definitely going to be banned? So it really depends on what they had. But if it's a medical grade diuretic, they definitely shouldn't be having it. It's definitely banned. But if it's a herbal one, those ones you can get at a sup store, at a naturopath or something like that, then that's perfectly fine. That's no issue there. Scotty, you can talk about maybe the usefulness or the non-usefulness of diuretics, but what do you think about that?
Well, diuretics are banned under WADA. Again, I think I touched on this a few weeks ago. In order for something, if a supplement's banned, it falls under the 3 rules that WADA has. So it has to basically enhance, or the potential to enhance performance. It has to represent potential harm, or it does represent harm, or it violates the spirit of the sport. So diuretics definitely are banned by WADA. But in terms of those natural ones, we can go into why you shouldn't take diuretics, but I think we've covered this, quite a fair bit. It just doesn't make any sense to try and manipulate that. I know they use it in the enhanced side, but equally they're also pushing lots of other different types of pharmacology. But as a natural, your body has systems that it puts in place whenever you're trying to muck around with the body's osmotic balance. It will always be smarter than what you are. So trying to use like a dandelion tea, you're trying to excrete more water. Your body has to have a certain ratio of fluid in certain cellular compartments. And we've spoken about what happens if you're trying to manipulate extracellular or interstitial fluid in terms of trying to preserve a look, or to make someone look dry and hard. All that happens is when you're trying to excrete more water, your body will just take water where it has it, i.e. intracellularly, and it will stick it in that extracellular space to try and combat that. So all you're doing is you're ruining your look per se. And that's why, you can see sometimes when people are like, oh, I use a natural diuretic, and they just look so washed out because it just ruins the look. We spoke about the importance of AVP, or antidiuretic hormone, in terms of its effect on the body to control osmotic balance, blood pressure regulation, and obviously sodium homeostasis as well. So I think if you are looking to play around with diuretics, I don't think you should be doing it full stop, because I think it's dangerous, but trying to use them as a natural form in natural bodybuilding is just dumb. And equally, if you're using them on the enhanced side, and I'm guessing you're using different types of diuretics, they obviously, whoever's administering them, they probably have a better idea of why they're doing it. But most enhanced guys that I know who speak about that have mucked around diuretics, they end up like hyperkalemic and in the hospital because they've got ridiculous low levels of potassium. And you can actually, like, when you're mucking around with diuretics, you can die. So your electrolyte levels are super, super important, especially when you're fucking around things like sodium. Like, your heart requires sodium for it to beat. So I think you're talking about, trying to place in a bodybuilding competition, worrying about tiny elements of minutia like that. You should be worrying about just dieting hard, training hard, and getting lean. And then you don't need to worry about things like that.
Anything on that, MG?
Remember when, open bodybuilding and, 18 months ago went through that really bad patch of quite a few deaths?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the enhanced lifters that I spoke to around that time said that a lot of that was diuretic related.
Yeah, definitely was.
I'm speculating, but I'm sure it played a part for sure. Some of the tragic passings of people that were actually like backstage at a show.
Yeah, it is tragic, isn't it? Also, too, like, this is a natural athlete. They would have been tested at their show. Actually, I know this person was tested at their show. So if they were doing anything suspect, it would be picked up. If they were taking a diuretic, it was probably dandelion tea or something like that. All right,
right.
Let's move on. So let's go into some nutrition-related questions. This one's to do with meal prep. This is actually a pretty common one that I get, and you boys probably get too. I do my meal prep on a Sunday, but my coach does my check-in on a Monday and might adjust my macros. How do I navigate this? So we do that, boys. Like most of us, we do all check-ins at the start of the week, but someone a couple of days beforehand is probably doing their meal prep on the weekend. How best to navigate and know whether how they should meal prep? Do you want to go with this one, MG?
Yeah, so pretty easy. Like, I do something similar, and if there's the potential for a forecasted change, what I do is I know roughly what I'm going to be eating. Let's say it's potato, chicken, beef mince, roasted vegetables. So I just cook all of those items individually. and leave them all in separate containers. And then on Monday, when I get my check-in back, I then go and weigh out my meals individually. So I cook everything in bulk, put them all in separate containers, and then go and make my individual meals for those days once I get my macros. Just an easier way to do it. You don't have to, sit there and you don't have to you're making 4 containers instead of making, 12, 15 containers for the week. And then you just go back and pick out and weigh as you go. And that way you don't have to stress about your coach changing anything.
Yeah. And also from a meal prep perspective, they're prepping their cooked meals, right? So there's a lot of things that they don't have cooked if they're mixing their cereal and their yogurt together. So even if they've prepped everything and the coach does give them a change, it should be quite easy to still maybe adjust the meals that aren't cooked and the meals in and around those cooked meals. So even if they did mix all their ingredients together and they're like, well, I can't throw these in the bin. Well, maybe it means they've got to have less honey on their breakfast, or they've got to take out some cereal or some cream of rice or whatever that may be. So normally, I don't know about you guys, but if it's in a prep or if it's in a phase and we're making weekly adjustments, they're never going to be significant big adjustments where it's probably going to throw all their meal prep out the window. If they are entering a new phase where will be a significant adjustment, we normally give them that adjustment a week or two earlier, and we say, okay, when we start, we're going to start here, just so you know, so you can prepare for that. How about you, Scotty? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think if you think about it logically, proteins, like let's assume that you're in contest prep, because in the improvement season, it's not really going to make a difference. Your food's not going to be going crazy jumps every week. You wouldn't have thought so. But protein's going to stay pretty constant. So you're cooking all of your meat. So that shouldn't really matter. You think about your fats, it's going to come from nuts, seeds, avocado, maybe some oils or fatty fish. So peanut butter, that's not really going to change. So you're really just talking about manipulating carbohydrates. So as MG said, if you're doing rice, and that's one of those things where, if you are really concerned about that, you could always just buy packet rice, or you could just cook a big bunch up and then just portion it out as you want to do it. Bearing in mind with rice, you need to weigh if you wanted to allocate it properly, you'd need to work out what's raw, cook it, then work out what the cooked weight equates to for raw weight to get the exact values if you're going down that path. And exactly the same with potato, because how you cook potato, if you just cook it in the oven, it'll dehydrate. If you boil it, you'll get a shitload of volume. So things like that. But as long as you do that and you get the cooked and raw conversions, it shouldn't really be that hard, I don't think.
Yeah, I think we all are on the same page with that one there for sure. And we probably do it all the same way.
Yeah, I think
all right. Best ways to map out meals. For example, 3 main meals with snacks, or do you map out your meals as a pre-workout meal, a post-workout meal, and then additional meals above that? So, Scotty, how would you normally map out the meals for a day for a common scenario?
Again, if they're in contest prep versus improvement season, it's going to be very different, because if you've got someone, like say you've got a guy and he's on 450 grams of carbs, he's doing 5 meals a day, he doesn't need to have all of his carbs directed around pre-workout and then after workout and post-workout, etc. But if you're in contest prep, I'm guessing maybe that's where this person's going. Giving some consideration, if you're on lower carbohydrate, then you want to prioritize carbohydrate in the pre-workout window. So I always say to my athletes who want to fuel the meal before we train and the meal before that, will usually be our higher carbohydrate meals. But if you're on 400 or 500 grams of carbs, it doesn't really matter, because muscle glycogen saturation is probably going to be topped up regardless. I think when you're talking about eating more carbohydrate, you need to, this is something that I've really, lent into a lot more over the last few years as my knowledge around nutritional sciences is improved, is what the amount of carbs you push in per serving. Like if you've got 600 grams of carbs, rather than doing 200 grams in a pre-workout meal to think I've got to get heaps into that meal, I would probably rather do 6 meals and then make them all 100. Or if I've gone as high as 800 grams, rather than just eating 4 really big meals, which once upon a time I've done that, I'll make an effort to eat smaller meals so that I can actually partition the carbohydrate properly, because everyone's going to have a threshold for what they can tolerate, digest, and metabolize. And also from a utilization perspective, because how much food you're eating, like in the improvement season, when you're eating lots of food, I think it's naive to think that you're going to absorb all of those calories, because there's an abundance of food coming in. And that's why bowel movement regularity is a lot more consistent when you're eating more food in the improvement season versus when I'm in prep. It's like, oh, I don't go to the bathroom as much and I feel like there's always food sat inside me longer. It's because your body has sensed it's in an energy compromised state. So digestion's a lot slower. We absorb the calories to a lot higher extent because we're under obviously duress because we're not getting insufficient food. So I think if you go by the rule that if you're dieting, you want to make sure that you're getting a good amount of carbohydrate for girls, if it works within your intakes, and you can have sort of 60 to 70 grams as a pre-workout meal. If you're not getting above sort of 250 grams of carbs within your intake throughout the day, I think 60 to 70 as a pre-workout is going to be good. Again, giving yourself about 90 minutes to digest it. And then your next biggest carb meal for me would be the one before that, because those meals are essentially going to fund your training. Yeah, you might be fatigued afterwards, but you'll feed protein and then maybe a little bit of carbohydrate afterwards. But essentially, towards the back end of the day, when you're likely going to be a lot less active, it probably makes more sense for me from a biochemistry perspective to induce lipolysis later in the day. If I'm not as active, I don't have that demand of carbs, and factoring in that when we consume carbohydrate, it blunts that that response. So that's kind of how I do it. I think it makes more sense that carbs are a substrate your body likes to utilize, tail them around the training window. But when you're in the improvement season, you can probably pick and choose how you go about it. But another thing, when you're feeding carbohydrate, you need to be mindful of fiber and fat, because that does delay gastric emptying. Again, if you think about your carbohydrate meal you're having, you want to get those nutrients into the blood as quickly as possible. And if you're having a lot of fat or a lot of fiber with that meal, it delays that process. So I think as a golden rule, I always say when carbs are high, try and keep your fats and your fiber super low. Like if it's pre-workout, I'll have as close to zero fat as possible and no fiber at all. And then in the post-workout meal, it's not as important in terms of having a little bit of fiber or a little bit of fat. But again, the goal is you want to get things into the blood as quickly as possible. So I think they're the golden rules. And then when carbs are lower, have a lot more fiber. That's why you'll normally have a heap of veg at night, and obviously have your fats with that as well.
Yeah, it's actually pretty common thought that, post-workout, I'm going to be hungry. That's when I want my carbs to be high, and they think that, I want to really make sure I can get that hunger under control. So that's where I should have my biggest meals. But, as you kind of gave that recommendation, is you probably should have the higher carbohydrate meals before you train to fuel that training there. But you can still have carbs, obviously, after you train. But as you said, kind of, more volume, more fiber, vegetables, salads, those kind of things, fruits, that kind of stuff too.
Yeah, and I think as well with the post-workout period, like everyone thinks is, let's say that I have my pre-workout meal at 12 and I train at 1:30 and my session goes for, I don't know, an hour and a half. And so you get to 3 and you're like, I've got to eat straight away. I've got to get protein. If you've had a decent bolus of protein, like let's say at least 30 grams of a complete protein source with a high digestible amino acid score of that protein, you're probably good to go until like 4, 5 o'clock. Not saying that you should wait that long, but if you are someone that's struggling with hunger is really, really tough, and you're only having 4 meals, like if you're dieting on 4 meals in prep and you've already had 2 and you get to 3 o'clock and you know that 7 o'clock is when you would usually have your dinner, you don't want to have your next meal at 3, you want to drag it out a little bit. As long as you've had a good amount of protein, if that helps you manage hunger a little bit better, then by all means you can do that, because we know, and this has been shown time and time again now, it's your net protein intake. They used to think that if you have 100 grams of protein, it'll go up and then it'll come down quite quickly, versus we now know that if you have a large amount of protein, muscle protein synthetic response is elongated for an extended period of time. So I don't think that you should restrict protein afterwards. I think there's no reason to delay it unless you have a good reason to why you would want to do that. But I think being strategic with meal timing, I know these days everyone's like, just hit your net intakes, it doesn't matter. But I think, and I'm an advocate for those elements of minutia, especially in prep, because I think those little differences can make a significant difference. And equally, again, I see with the top practitioners and the top athletes that get inside out conditioned, they all follow a very similar belief. So I think there's definitely something in that. And it's one of those things you don't really know until you've experienced it.
What about UMG? What's the common kind of meal structure? Is it, 3 main meals and some snacks, or?
I think what I'll typically do, man, let's say I'm working with someone who's maybe reasonably new to tracking, or has tracked, but has never tracked with, the mindset of, trying to get it as optimal as it can be to be a physique athlete. I'll give some like percentage guidelines as a nice place to start. So one of the important things is like, all right, let's work out what time you train. And then, we'll build your carbohydrate intake across the day with a split of like, we're going to try and get, say, 35 in your pre, 35% of your daily intake in your pre, 35 in your post, and then we're going to split 15 with your meal 1 and 15 in your meal 4. And that's how you're going to break your carbs up for the day. And we'll start there and then we'll build from that. But yeah, that's typically what I'll do, man, is just work out how many meals per day and then give them a little bit of a guideline of a percentage split that I think would be an optimal place to start, and then just build as their experience increases as well, man.
Yeah. So it sounds like, just listening to everything, that we're around about 4 to 5 meals per day is kind of the common go-to. 3 is probably not enough because you've got to take into consideration pre and post workout. Now, again, some people say, well, they're not snacks, they're meals, vice versa, but let's just consider them meals. So mostly it's going to be around that 4 to 5 mark of meals that we need to have per day.
Yeah. And I think everything that's obviously Scotty said is bang on. It's like, for me, I just stick to keep fat lower around the training window and integrate my fat in the other meals in the day and keep carbohydrates higher around the training window. And that's kind of like the simple template to use for someone who's trying to plan out their day of eating, man.
Yeah, awesome. All right, let's go on to a training question. How often do you change training programs for clients? How many week blocks do you do? And does it depend on a particular client? Maybe MG, do you want to go first?
Yep. So it absolutely does depend on the athlete, and it does depend on the type of response you get. Again, everyone being so different. I've got athletes that, will change every 6 to 8 weeks. And then I've got athletes who will run a program for a lot longer, maybe as long as, 12 weeks, where there may be some changes along the way, but they may just be very minor changes to some smaller isolation movements. But, anyone that's, say done a block of, reasonable RDLs or deadlifts or has taken the hack squat from A to B, knows that to get really, really good at it, if you're changing too often, which is something that I see really, really regularly, like, full program changes every 4 weeks. We've spoken about this many times before, but for me, I'm really hitting my strides in week 5 and 6, right? I'm really starting to get the gist of it now. And that's when I'm hitting my good progressive overload. If you were to take that movement out, for me at week 5 or 6, you're doing me a disservice because I'm just about to get the benefit from it. So I don't think that there needs to be a specific number or a set number that's perfect for everyone. I do think, coaches should have their eye on things sort of from the 6-week mark to see if there does need to be any changes. But if you've got the type of relationship you should have with your client, these are discussions you're having weekly anyway. And if you're looking at data and you're looking at performance in the gym, you're seeing what movement patterns are performing well and what ones aren't so fruitful. And you're getting feedback from your clients anyway in their comments on their check. So you should know if there is something that needs to be a change. But for the most part, let's say that, you've got an athlete who's performing well. There's no negative feedback in terms of things like mind-muscle connections on exercises. I mean, I might run someone as long as, all the way up to 3 months, man. If they're still yielding a result, there's a saying that's, if it ain't broke, you don't need to fix it. And I think that's true in this case. Ultimately, there's things that are going to take place along that journey, things like deloads, again, which are individualized based on, athletes' feedback and how they're performing. And for some athletes, I deload them a lot more regularly. But I don't think that changing the program needs to happen as much as it does happen out there in the industry.
Mm-hmm. What do you think, Scotty?
I agree with everything that MG said. I think it's one of those things. Everyone, and it depends. I'm guessing that we're referring to physique athletes, because if it's a powerlifter, I work with some powerlifters as well, it's going to be a little bit different. But for the most part, I think too many people run deloads and devolumes unnecessarily just because they're programmed in. And it's like, oh, every 6 weeks you'll do that. But as I've discussed on here before, if you add that up over the entirety of the year, it's a lot of training that you can lose and miss out on. But I think if it's a good quality program, you should be able to have on most movements 6 to 8 months of really good progress. But once you start to see that ceiling, being touched in terms of performance, and you've just rinsed everything you can out of it, then it might be time to make an adjustment. But I get that for a lot of people, more so people new to the scene, they think that if it's very similar from mesocycle to mesocycle, that maybe their coach is being lazy, when in reality that you just need time to get good at the movement and to rinse it for all that you can. Consistency for a lot of people can be boring, but consistency and continuity is very, very important in terms of building a physique over time. So, arbitrary guidelines, anywhere from 8 to 12 weeks. But I mean, if we talk about most people's mesocycle, like I tend to work off 8-week blocks. But from mesocycle to mesocycle, over 3 blocks, you might only see 2 or 3 exercise changes over the entirety of those 4 blocks. And most of the changes might be from either exercise order or volume. It might be like you had 2 top sets of 6 to 8, and then 1 back off with an intensifier. And then maybe next block, it might be 1 top set and then 1 back off set and an intensifier. And the volume might be, instead of 6 to 8s, it's 2 sets of 8 to 10. So I think little adjustments like that can help elongate that period and almost lift the ceiling for progression a little bit further. But you don't need to be making lots of chopping and changing from program to program. I don't think, anyway.
Yeah, mine's very similar. I don't think I've done anything less than 8 weeks in a long time, or anything more than 12 weeks in a long time either. So it's going to sit within that range. And I'm similar to you. Mine are mostly 8-week blocks, and unless I need to change otherwise, but that's kind of the going in position. And as you kind of said, is after that 8 weeks, it's not like a brand new program where everything changes. It might even be like, as you said, like a 10 or 20% change. Majority of the movements stay the same, maybe slight variations, slight change in volume or rep or intensity technique or something like that. But it's mostly the same because, as you said, you've got to keep pushing through and progressing and keeping things consistent. So you can become really, really good at a lift before you do change it out. So yeah, I wouldn't be expecting massive changes and a big overhaul of my training block every single time I get a new one.
Yeah.
Okay. Next one is about intensity techniques. So we kind of just mentioned it a little bit there, but what are your common intensity techniques and which ones do you like the most? Rest, pause, drop set, cluster, those kind of things. Scotty, what are some of the common intensity techniques that you use within your blocks?
I think most people know I'm a very big advocate for the rest, pause, partials. Obviously, there's a lot of hype. I feel like this has been, it's been a no-brainer for me for a long time, but I think now that there's been a few really good studies that have demonstrated that maximizing time spent in the lengthened muscle position does elicit a greater response in terms of hypertrophy adaptation. So now that that's kind of a lot more globally aware, I feel like more people are placing emphasis around that. But I think one of the reasons that I really like intensification pieces like the rest, pause, partial is because obviously in an online setting, we don't have access to our clients every day to see them in the gym, like in a face-to-face session. So it can be challenging to ensure that you know exactly, are they taking things to proximity of failure in order for them to maximize their hypertrophy potential. So the advantage of the rest, pause, partial, it ensures that they are taking things to close proximity of failure because, well, hopefully most of the time, because each of those clusters is almost like to failure. So if someone was maybe shy 1 or 2 reps, you're giving them 10 seconds and then they're going again and you're stimulating the muscle in that lengthened position. They take 10 seconds, they're going again in that position. So again, I use the analogy of cellular signaling like a dimming switch. And so in terms of, if you think about when the switch is turned up as bright as possible, you're maximizing that signaling response, which is obviously going to, activate those downstream proteins, which cause those transcription factors to switch on and to make more DNA, more or less, or more proteins per se. So in order to maximize that, we need to make sure that our athletes are taking their muscles and also that they're aware of what training to proximity of failure actually feels like. Because the saying goes, you can get someone, you put them in a hack squat and tell them to go to failure, and then you could bring them back the next week, keep everything the same, but you, me, or MG is right by their side, and we show them what training to failure actually feels like. And it's like it could be 10, 15 reps. I think the research shows that most people is around about a 5 to 6 rep discrepancy of where their perception of failure and where true failure is. Now, outliers to that are going to be advanced lifters who know what it feels like to be in that position, but it just helps ensure that your athletes are getting the very most out of their training. It almost gets them out of their own way and eliminates the possibility of potentially not training as hard as they potentially could. Now, the caveat to that is if you do that on every set, the recovery to stimulus ratio is just completely out of whack. So that's why, for the most part, let's say that it's a push day, your first push movement might be like a cable fly with no intensifiers. Then you might have like a dumbbell incline press, 2 top sets, and then a back off set with an intensifier like a rest, pause, partial. And they might have one other pressing piece with the same thing, 2 top sets, a back off with an intensifier. So you're not doing it on every set, because if you do, you're just going to end up banged up. But you're using this on the last set of that given exercise. So I'll usually only have maybe 2 of those intensifiers per muscle group per session.
I want to break down a couple of things that you said. So firstly is, the use of intensifiers is to make sure that someone is training hard. So to trick them into, or to teach them into training hard and training with intensity. And obviously we're using to get more volume out too. That was that. The next bit was you mentioned about lengthened partials. So let's give some examples of where or what movements or what part of the movement you're talking about there. So for instance, like a lat pull down, how would you use it in a lat pull down, for instance?
So let's say with a lat pull down, when my arms are elevated all the way up to the top, I'm in the lengthened position of my lat. So I may be, let's say that I'm shooting for, we'll run it from the scratch. Let's say that I'm doing 2 sets of 10 to 12 reps, but that last set is a rest pause partial cluster set of 3. So my first set, let's say I have 100 kilos and I do 12 reps. I rest for 3 minutes. I go again. On the next set, I get 12 again, and then I'm going to rest for 10 seconds. And now I'm going to commence my rest pause partials. So I'll go again. Let's say that I can get 3 good reps, and then that last one's almost like a quarter or a half rep. Bang, I'll let that go. Rest 10 seconds. I go again. This time I only get 2 complete full range of motion reps, but then I'll also take another maybe half rep, and then I'll let it go. And on the last one, maybe I only get 1 full rep, but then I'll take 1 or 2 because I know it's the last cluster, sort of partial reps. And the reason that they're really good, because again, we spoke about at the start, if my arm is elevated here, I'm in the lengthened position. So in terms of time under tension, that lat muscle is exposed to a lot of stress in that lengthened position, causes a lot more cellular swelling, metabolite buildup, and mechanical tension. And that is going to, we think about our dimming switch, that's turning that signaling process up as bright as possible.
Yeah, so you're saying that, the intensification, the cluster or the rest pause includes full range of motion reps, but also you should try to get some partials out too, because there's some growth that can happen there, right?
Absolutely. So again, so a partial is referencing partial range of motion. So on those partial reps, we still want full, like, I'm not saying that you should never do full reps, because I still think there's definitely some benefit, and you want to get the blood into the muscle. So the more you shorten it, the more blood that you're going to get injected in as well. So we definitely want those, but I'll always do 3 clusters. So on that first cluster, take as many normal reps, and then I'll take 1 partial. It might be a half or a quarter rep, because I don't want to go to absolute failure, as in take on like 5 quarter reps, because then second cluster and third cluster will be crap. So then on the second set, same thing. And on the last set, I'll get as many full range of motion reps, and then I'll take as many cluster reps as I can, to the point where the load's just not moving anymore, because I know that there's no way, that there's nothing more that my muscle can do. I've maximized it from that specific range of motion, and I'm going to maximize that response. And once you experience one of those sets, if you're talking about a lat pull down, the amount of blood and the amount of swelling that you get in that area is ridiculous. You do it on quads, hamstrings, biceps. It's ridiculous. I don't know why I have envisioned in my mind I don't know if you were there for I took Amy, your client, through a cluster set on the leg extension in Bali, and I used those foam pads to increase the range. And I remember her face on like the second cluster, and she looked like she was getting very, very angry at me at the time. But just the amount of discomfort and pain, and not that the goal was to induce her into pain, but just because there was so much blood in the muscle. And it makes sense, right? Like, you're taking these pillars that we know, cellular swelling, mechanical tension, muscle damage, that induce hypertrophy, and you're rinsing them for all that you can. So definitely a lot of benefit, but equally, we wouldn't give a newbie to the gym a training technique like this. Like, this is an advanced intensifier, so it's not for your average gym goer, and they, equally, they don't need something like that. But adding these intensifiers, in my opinion, definitely has a place, provided that it's periodized, adequately.
Yeah, rest pause is probably my most common intensifier that I do program. You kind of make it a rest pause, but then with a cluster on the end, if that kind of makes sense. I won't program that for everyone, but my most common way I do a rest pause is, and normally it's on the last set. It could be the last 2 sets, but it's like, you go to the rep range, you rest for 10 seconds, and then you go to failure. That's the rest pause set done. Whereas yours is actually back to back. It's almost like, do that 10-second rest, do as many as you can, another 10-second rest, do as many as you can, another 10-second rest, do as many as you can, then you're done. So it's almost like you're clustering, you're going back to back on the rest pause. That makes sense. MG, do you use rest pause or rest pause partials or rest pause clusters, whatever you want to call them? And is there any other ones that you like to use?
The reason why I just use Scotty's example and the exact weights that Scotty said. If you think about this and you think about the long-term benefit of this, just with Scotty's example, 2 sets of 12 at 100 kilos, someone who does what he did versus someone who doesn't. You got 2,400 kilos of accumulated volume versus Scott got 3 on his first, 2 on his second, 1 on his last. Let's not even count the partials. So he's getting 6 extra reps. So every time he does it, he's getting 600 kilos of extra volume versus subject A, right? Mm-hmm. You think about that over an 8-week block, it's a lot of extra volume and a lot of extra potential for growth. So I just think that, they are such great weapons, and I love to use them when I feel like somebody's really at a point where they can't get any more. It's like, all right, now we're going to throw rest pauses in because we can find a little bit more. So they're a great method of forced overload as a coach to be able to introduce to a client. But again, the risk that people run is that they start to try and do it all the time. And then what happens? They're unable to recover from it, and all of a sudden, you start to see spikes in other things. Oh, I'm starting to feel a bit of a twinge in my elbow. I'm starting to feel a twinge in my shoulder. It's like, all of a sudden, Scott said maybe twice per session. Now you're doing it 14 times because you're trying to push to that level of failure. And now they're starting to run into some other problems. So it's definitely like an amazing tool. But like Scott said, you got to manage how much you use it. So, periodize properly is the key. But I love them all. What my favorite thing out of everything is, and this isn't an intensifier, but my favorite thing to do is 2 sets and a back offset. If you're not out there utilizing a back offset, and you've never utilized a back offset, and just to give you a little bit of, say, some parameters around a back offset, let's say 2 heavy sets of 8, 6 to 8, and then maybe a back offset where you take 15% of the weight off and you try and aim for 12 to 15 plus. From a mind muscle connection perspective, that third back offset for me tends to be such a great set all the time. I always finish that set with the biggest pump. And I tend to feel like I get the most benefit from that set. So if you're not out there utilizing, a simple back offset, try incorporating a back offset. It's one of the best tools ever.
Now, you're not doing that back offset as what we would say a traditional drop set. You're actually having a rest, and it's
the same rest, the exact same rest. I'll just take off, somewhere between, say, 10 and 15% of the weight, and try and aim for a rep range that's a lot higher. So, we always talk about hypertrophy happening in all different rep ranges. We want to hit 6 all the way up to 25, 30. This gives you the opportunity to do that in the same exercise. So you don't then need to, have a program where you run 6 reps for 8 weeks and then you go and do 20. Do it all on the same exercise. You do 2 heavy, 6 to 8, and then your back offset might get 15. And then guess what? Next week, try and turn 15 into 17, and then take it up as high as 20. And then once you hit 20, make your back offset a little bit heavier. Yeah. It's such a great way to progress.
Yeah. What other intensification methods do you use, Scotty? Have you ever used like a high rep cluster, or that some people call them total reps, where you give them total, it's 80 reps for this exercise? Or have you ever used Myo reps, which is similar to a rest pause cluster? Does that kind of make sense? Have you ever used any of those?
Yeah, so the cluster set, or in strength conditioning, is referred to more so as a diminishing set. So let's say that you got 100 reps on like a leg press or something like that. Or I remember there was a session we saw you doing hack squat for like 80 reps or something, just disgusting. I think they definitely have a place, especially when you're time poor. And again, it's kind of like maximizing, again, being able to use potentially a lighter load, but getting a lot of volume. It's ticking that box, ensuring that you're heightening that response. But I think the thing that you want to factor in, and we didn't really touch on it with the rest pause partial clusters, you need to be selective from a systemic fatigue perspective what movements you choose. So you won't ever really see me program a rest pause partial cluster set on like a hack squat or a deadlift, because the amount of fatigue you accumulate and the risk of injury. And I do see sometimes people using that, and if a hack squat, you could probably get away with it and to an extent. And I've actually tried it on that, but equally, it just ruins you for the remainder of the session because the fatigue you accumulate, it just doesn't justify it. But say a leg extension or a hamstring curl. But my reps, yeah, I'll use, if I'm ever doing blood flow restriction training, something similar for that. Like I'll use a cluster set where it might be, you've got 100 reps you need to get to in the least amount of, sets possible. And there might be like a 30-second RI between each of those clusters. Again, I think one of the benefits of using this style of training, if you're time poor and you don't have the ability to spend a lot of time in the gym, you can get a long bang for your buck. But equally, if you're an older athlete, in terms of preserving connective tissue, it allows you to be able to get a lot of work in without having to do an abundance of volume. Because these days people do so much junk volume where it's just unnecessary. Whereas you could do, like I said, maximum you might have 16 to 18 working sets per muscle group per week, as opposed to someone who's doing 30 or 40. If you're using these intensifiers, yeah, if you were to count each cluster, it adds that up. But I think it allows you to get a lot more return on investment without having to do anywhere near as much volume. And I think that it makes a profound difference in terms of preserving one's connective tissue and essentially time in the sport by not being injured and breaking down.
Yeah.
With those totals, or total reps, or whatever you want to call it, diminishing reps, or the way you normally program, or what I've done in the past, been given to me, or I've programmed out is, say for instance, it's 80 reps for this exercise. You'll pick a weight that you can do 20 reps of that exercise for, and that'll be the weight that you use. And for the first set, you'll go to 15 to 20, then you'll rest. It could be 10 seconds, 20 seconds, or 30 seconds. And then you'll do as many reps as you can. Then you'll rest again. As many reps as you can, you rest again. You continue to count your reps continuously, and you keep performing that cycle until you hit the total reps, 80, 100, whatever's been prescribed for you. With the myos, it's kind of similar. So the way I've done them or programmed in the past is you pick a weight where you can do 15 to 20. And for the first set, you go to failure, you get to 15 to 20. Then you rest for 5 seconds. Then you do as many as you can. Rest for 5 seconds, as many as you can. And you normally repeat that for at least 5 cycles. So it's 5-second rests for 5 cycles. And what you're going to find is with something like that, or even the totals or the clusters, is the first set is to accumulate all the fatigue. So therefore, for the next sets or the next clusters or increments, your rest is so short that you can only achieve a couple extra reps because the fatigue hasn't dissipated yet. And you're always in that kind of upper fatigue state. So they're a really, really good way, if you're short in time, to be super efficient and to get a fair bit of volume out, but they're definitely not a strength builder in any way. So it's not something that you do all the time, but I have given it to people in prep if they're a little bit time poor and they need to do like side raises or bicep curls or leg extensions or leg curls, and we just want to get a bunch of volume out, but they don't have the time to be in the gym for hours. Have you ever used them, MG, myos? You done them in the past?
Yeah, man, I reckon you gave them to me 10 years ago.
Yeah, probably.
It was always 15, 5, 5, 5 by 5. Yeah. I just love it, man, because so many athletes that I give them to will be doing 3 sets of 15 at this weight, and all of a sudden you bring those in, and you've turned 45 reps across 3 sets all of a sudden into 62 reps. And it's like, wow, that happened pretty fast. Like, that's a big jump in volume with just such a minor change.
Yeah.
They are a great tool. And I like that high fatigue state, man. The pumps are too, right?
They are pretty crazy, yeah. Especially on something like a leg extension. It's crazy. I think one of the biggest benefits, and I think we've already touched on this with these intensification methods, is it's really teaching someone where their failure is and how hard to train. Because if they've always just done standard sets and reps, they may never know where their failure point is and what an intense burn really, really feels like.
For sure.
All right. I want to leave it on that note. I love talking about that stuff. I could talk about those things forever.
Yeah, and I think for most people, that's where a lot of people get a lot of benefit is, some of the inside, I'm not going to call them, tricks or tips, but just things that, maybe you haven't experienced before that, may give you a little bit of an added benefit and are worth you giving it a go if you haven't.
Yeah. Give those Myo reps, total reps, rest pause clusters, rest pause partials a go and let us know how you go with it. All right, Scotty, we'll see you when you get here.
You will, bro. I mean, I'll speak to you tomorrow and Thursday, but you will. I won't be here next week, so I'm sure you boys will hold down the fort, and then hopefully I'm not too jet lagged for the following one.
Yeah, looking forward to it, man. Looking forward to you coming home safe and
get home safe, man. Can't wait to see you.
It's going to be good. All right, guys. Till next time.
Take care, guys. Thanks. See ya.